Apparently this is the temple of Olympian Zeus. What's left of it. I just kind of ran across this site looking for something else. It's €2 to get in, so what the heck. Pull this thing out on the streets much. This is the Placa, big tourist district, a tiny part of it. Just to get an idea of what the pedestrian situation is, at least on the roads that are closed off to traffic, which there's quite a lot. This whole little walking excursion I'm on started off as an attempt to find Heinrich Schliemann's house after I left the Archaeology Museum. I failed. I'll have to find it another time. So that's why I'm kind of just wandering around the city. I think I'm gonna follow the sign that's right there on the left of the screen and check out the museum and then maybe climb the hill. It's pretty hot and sunbathed today. Not sure I'm ever going to do that. We'll see. So here's the Acropolis Museum. It's about 5 years old. And my voice is really dry. I think it might actually be the pollution. I just realized what I've been walking over. Look down. Crazy. And even the gift shop. There's a clear. Oh, I'm sorry. Mobile phone use is not allowed in the Acropolis Museum. So I've entered the Agora of classical Athens, which includes a Byzantine church. So I'm in the Agora, which is much bigger than expected, and I was just kind of cutting through on my way to the Parthenon, but it's so big and so maze-like, and I've still got to get all the way up there by 7:30 when they stop letting people in, when it starts to get dark. So we'll see what happens. Seriously, I'm lost in the Agora. It's a real maze. But, according to this sign, this is the road to Piraeus. And I know Piraeus is to the south. And I need to get to the south. So, I'm going to take the road to Piraeus. Okay, I've reached the end of the road to Piraeus. So, okay, I seem to have found my way out of that part, and I'm climbing the hill. Obviously, the Acropolis is not wheelchair accessible, but anyway, the next footage ought to be from the Parthenon, maybe. I'd just like to point out that I was wrong. There is in fact an elevator for disabled persons, although I would love to know what it looks like. The entire way up is filled with Asian girls posing. I don't know what's going on. But this is the west entrance, so not the Parthenon, but to the Acropolis. This is called the Propola, I think. Almost there. There's the temple I visited earlier. There's the Acropolis Museum.
Thank you very much. Have a beautiful evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Jumped off the bus in Nafplio. Nice place. I can't check into the hotel for a couple of hours yet. I'm going to try to get into the museum with my backpack, and if they won't let me, I'll have to go to the hotel and hang out. Anyway, I'm going to go see where the water is.
Also the inside the throne of the church. And then we'll join back to this is the main street of the town. Okay.
Second floor of the museum. This museum holds mostly artifacts from Tiryns, which is where I'm headed tomorrow, so that's why I'm here. So this is interesting, the fully automated bike rental. Still not doing it though. Well, here I am in Nafplio, post dinner, post bottle of ouzo, sitting by the water by myself. Also, the water is blue, but it's not as blue as I expected it to be. I think maybe you have to get out into the islands in the middle of the Aegean to really see the super blue, clear stuff. But it's definitely a different color than back home. And I could still go up to the Palamidi Fortress tomorrow, which is almost 1,000 feet high. And I think that might be the way up that winding trail. So I guess that's going to depend on how I feel when I get back from Tiryns. We'll see. So I'm still out on the a pier. It's concrete. I'm not sure. I can't remember what the term for this is. Anyway, it's a big rectangular concrete slab that's jutting out into the water. I'm looking back north from whence I came. Athens is in that direction. And this sort of bowl in front of me between the shore and the mountains is the Argolid Plain. Somewhere right out there in the middle at the foot of those mountains or in those hills is Mycenae, where I'll be going in a couple of days. Tiryns is off there somewhere. I can't see it, it's too hazy. I'll be going there tomorrow. That tall sort of conical hill right in the middle is Argos, or looms above the city of Argos, that I actually came through on the way here. It's the biggest town in the area. Not much to see there, except there's a big classical amphitheater that I don't think I'll have time to look at. And then there's the western edge of the plain. So essentially that flat space that you can see in the distance there between there and the mountains is one of the relatively few large fertile plains in Greece, which is otherwise kind of a rugged, not very fertile place. And that's why there are sort of a chain of Mycenaean, Bronze Age citadels that ring the plain, I guess defending it. One of them is Tiryns that I'll visit tomorrow, which is not far in from the coast. There's another one at Medea that isn't very well visited. I'd like to get to the Medea, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. I would have needed a bike to get there. It's in those hills up there. Mycenae is way, way back there, almost as far as the eye can see, about 10-12 miles away. And then Argos protected the western flank of it on that conical hill over there. And that's the Acropolis of Nafplio. And there are actually Bronze Age remains up there, so there was something going on up there, but it's not very well understood. And I wanted to get up there, but I was expecting there to be footpaths up there, but there isn't. There's just a road that goes from way back that way up there to the hotels that are on the top. And I can't see, no, there are people next to that tower. So to get up there, I would have to take that road. It'd be kind of a walk. The view would be pretty good. It wouldn't be as good as the view from way the hell up there. So I guess tomorrow I'll either go there or I'll just go there, depending on how I'm feeling when I get back from Tiryns, which is going to depend on how much I use buses to get to Tiryns, which I'm not sure about. I could end up using a bus to get there and not back. It's a little fuzzy because I have to go to the K-Tel bus station near where I came in today and try to figure out if I can get a bus to Argos and then get the driver to let me off at Tiryns. And then I could probably catch a bus back from Tiryns because I can expect that any bus that's stopping at Tiryns is probably going back to Nafplio. So I could end up walking all the way the 4 kilometers, 3 miles to Tiryns and then busing back, or I could bus both ways. So I guess it kind of depends how I feel, whether I actually want to climb that entire thing. And there's the Argolid, which is more than anything else what I came here to see. When I'm at Mycenae, in the hazy distance, I'll probably be hiking around from there quite a bit, and hopefully we'll film some of that. But anyway, what you're looking at there is where the next several days will take place. Here we see that tourist towns are pretty much all the same. Doesn't matter whether it's Gettysburg or Nafplio in Greece. There's always a carriage ride in traffic. I'm inside the Mycenaean citadel of Tiryns, about 2 miles away from Nafplio. The water, in the Bronze Age, the water came pretty much right up to this place, but it's all silted up and you can see the water's way out there now. These walls were built sometime before 1300 BC. The place burned around 1200 BC, just like pretty much all of the other Mycenaean palace centers. Alright, this end of the place is emptied out. This is the lower, sort of narrow part of the citadel that was all shops and storerooms. There's really nothing left but the outer ring of walls, which you wouldn't have been able to see because some buildings would have been up against them, and the foundations of various basement level storerooms and shops. And then up there, the part I haven't been to, over that hill, is the upper part of the citadel where the palace actually is, the Megaron. Can't go up that ramp, but I'm assuming that that path over there will get me up there. So I'm not really sure exactly how good the access is to the whole place. There's really nothing roping me off from jumping down there and crawling around. So I'd like to quickly document the fact that I am sitting inside a very small 3,300-year-old room of some kind. Unfortunately, I don't have my trowel. Should give you some idea of how thick these walls are. But this is a tunnel out of them. This is the arched vault that runs inside part of the walls. Probably the best known architectural feature of this place. You see it's got little openings. Unfortunately, I guess for fear of falling stones, they won't let anybody go in there. Although honestly, it looks like one of the more stable parts of the place, so too bad. Alright, so I've reached the main palace area on the very top, and I'm very happy to see that not only is there nobody up here, but there's absolutely no restrictions on access to anything. I can go into any of these rooms, whatever. Some of the fresco work that's on display at the Archaeology Museum in Athens that I photographed and I think videoed actually came off these walls. This would have been a palace in 1300 or 1200 BC. Presided over by whoever was ruling Tiryns. Nobody knows. If Homer was accurate, maybe Diomedes. And there's Nafplio off in the distance. I'm still planning to climb up there tonight. I don't know. It's about 900 feet up. And the steps go pretty much straight up the cliff. So, maybe. That's going to depend on whether I can get a bus back from here or whether I have to hoof it. I took the bus out here, but it's a Sunday, so the buses are a little bit sketchy. And I'll have to ask the lady at the booth whether there's another bus coming. I'm pretty sure there is. Yep, I'm doing this. 900 steps. So, I'm some tiny fraction of the way up. It's gonna be €4 to get in when I get there, which seems kind of high. I think they should be paying me to climb all these stairs. But if the old man and little girl that I just passed did it, then I ought to be able to, right? I've reached some kind of defensive pillbox. You can see the musket ports. This whole thing was built by the Venetians in the early 1700s. For hundreds of years, Greece was contested territory between often the Venetians and the Ottomans, which is, you know, how the Parthenon ended up in the shape that it's in. It would look a lot nicer if it hadn't blown up. I haven't been counting the steps, so I really don't know what my progress is. I know I'm not even halfway, or close to halfway there. Okay. 1,000 feet above the town. It's pretty neat. There's Tiryns. There. It's hard to see in the viewfinder. I think that's it in the middle. It looks, you know, like an easy walk from here. I ended up not having to walk. I just waited for the bus. I had to stand around for about a half hour, but it came. So this place is absolutely huge. Been walking a while, and it turns out there's an even higher part. That's what I was in before. The bells are starting to get on my nerves. Thank you. Okay, I'm on my way down. That's it for the day, I think. Next stop, Mycenae. Had to get a shot of this on the way down. So I'm at the hotel, second floor. They have each one of the few rooms named for some of the famous people who stayed there. Carl Jung. Here's my room. There's my sink. Some other famous archaeologists stayed in there, not at the same time. So I'm just out here walking up the road to the site. Can't really see it yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be around the corner here, because I know that, you know, these two hills loom directly over it, and it's only supposed to be 1 kilometer from the hotel, and I've gone almost that now, so should be there in a minute. And there it is. So now that the busload of mostly American tourists is cleared out. I should have this to myself for a few minutes. This is the so-called Treasury of Atreus. It's the first tomb that you reach as you walk up toward Mycenae, still several hundred yards away from the gate. It was built around 1250 BC. There were originally bronze doors and probably bronze doors and two big carved columns that, if you remember the footage in the museum in Athens, I was for some reason videoing those tall columns on either side of that one doorway. Those were replicas of the columns that were once here. They were elaborately carved, so it was a little fancier than this originally. And then in the late 18th century, Lord Elgin, the same guy that stripped the Parthenon of its marbles and took them back to the British Museum, came here and grabbed these too. So nobody knows who was buried here because we don't really know anything for sure about the late Bronze Age. But the date is consistent. If Homeric poetry has any kernel of truth to it, and I think that it does, this could have been a tomb for either Atreus or Agamemnon. I'm inclined to think probably Atreus if he's a real person, and probably other people. You know, it was a family, immediate family kind of a thing. And the ones that they found of this style around Greece, there was often horses, two chariot horses on either side of the body in the center of the floor, all sorts of offerings. Most of these things, especially these big obvious ones, were all looted many hundreds of years ago. This is, I think, 60 feet high to the top, perfectly vaulted, perfectly symmetrical, dressed ashlar masonry. This is a tomb type that you see come into Greece around, I think, 1300 BC, and not before. Who knows what inspired it? The echo is pretty amazing in the center of this thing. I don't know if it's screwing up the microphone or not. There's an odd little side chamber that other Tholos tombs don't have, that I can't go into, and there were all sorts of elaborate rosette carvings and decorations on the wall. But it's pretty incredible. And to think that people 3,200 plus years ago in Greece, which was not exactly the center of high civilization by Near Eastern standards compared to what the Egyptians were doing and others, the idea that they were able to build this is pretty amazing. And it shows that when you see the walls of Mycenae that are about the same age and they're kind of crude and rubbly and non-dressed, it gives the impression that, because it's not fancy and dressed like this, that they were somehow barbaric, but they were obviously capable at the same time of building amazing stuff like this that you would think would have been beyond their abilities, their engineering abilities. That lintel over the door, I can't remember how many tons that is supposed to weigh. I think 60. Just crazy how they got it up there. I can't imagine. It's interesting, those holes that are drilled or bored into the bottom of their pod. I wonder if those are contemporary. But there's a bunch of these Tholos tombs here, about a dozen, I think. None of them are quite as grand as this one. This is the absolute biggest one in Greece ever. Of course, after 1200 BC, when the Mycenaean civilization is destroyed, you don't see them at all anymore. Graves get much cruder. So it's only during the height of their civilization, during the 100 or so years before they flourished and then fell off the face of the earth, is when you see these really, majestic monuments being made. And I actually think that there's a political purpose to this. I think that, again, if there's any kernel of truth to the Iliad, to the Bardic tradition, and increasingly it seems likely that there was, if this is one of the family tombs of the dynasty of Atreus and Agamemnon, it's interesting that if you look at the poetry, what happens shortly before the Trojan War is Thebes, which is north of Athens, seems to have been the most important place. And archaeology might actually back that up. It was very important. And Thebes is destroyed. There was an epic poem like the Iliad called the Thebaid, which hasn't survived. All we have are plot synopses from later writers. And what seems to have happened is, interesting step pedestals over there. What seems to have happened, according to that poetry, is that the other kingdoms in Greece basically ganged up on Thebes and destroyed it. 7 kingdoms against 1. And once Thebes was destroyed, it stayed destroyed for a long time. The royal family was basically gone, which is why in the Iliad, there are no heroes from Thebes, because Homer is aware that it wouldn't be right to have that happening, 10 or 20 years after that war's taken place. So, I promise I'll wrap this up in a sec. Try not to annoy that lady. So, what I think happened is, after Thebes is destroyed, you have a king at Mycenae who is now the predominant king of Greece, having led that coalition. And he's eager to dress up this place and to make it grand, not only to be befitting a sort of quasi-capital of Greece, but also because it seems like the Mycenaeans in the 14th and 13th century were really trying to break onto the world scene. And they were trying to get territory in Anatolia, and they were butting heads with the Hittites, and they were trying to communicate with Egypt and trade. And stop this for a sec. Okay, I'm getting closer. I just walked up the road a little bit. I didn't know if I was keeping that one lady away by hanging out in there. But I don't think she was. I don't think I was. And another bus just showed up anyway. So, as I was saying, the Mycenaeans are trying to break out onto the world scene. And, when you compare Bronze Age Greece to Egypt and the Hittite capital and Babylon and places like that, it's pretty embarrassing what they have. And I think that a lot of what we're going to see when we get up there is an attempt by the dynasty at Mycenae to solidify their position and to make their capital worthy of being the capital among other capitals. And to make sure that when foreign delegations came here bearing cuneiform letters from Egypt or Hattusas or Babylon, that they wouldn't go back and tell the pharaoh that this place was just a bunch of shacks. All right, I'm gonna walk up closer. I should be encountering some more Tholos tombs before I actually get to the Lion Gate. And this is neat, I just caught sight of the entrance to another one of these Tholos tombs. They're all just sort of nestled into the slopes all over the place. And then if you look down there, you can see exposed walls. And down here, some house foundations. This should be the area where, maybe right there actually, where I think Dickinson University's been working for several years to uncover the outer city where common people lived. A lot of times, especially before the last decade or two, when you see artistic depictions of Mycenae and what it looked like, or Troy and what it looked like, it's just this big citadel and there's nothing outside. And that gives a false impression of these places. That what you're looking at there is simply the citadel, the castle that's in the center of a city of a few thousand people that are living, in humbler circumstances outside the walls. And archaeologists only in the last few decades have started to actually take an interest in that, because of course all of the early archaeologists of the 19th century and early 20th century were interested in finding grand things and gold and stuff like that. And of course, you now have more of a social history influence in archaeology, where people are interested in the lives of common people. And as a historian, I applaud that, because that's the kind of thing that I'm interested in. I don't have much interest in elites. But the problem when you extend that to archaeology, the problem is that if you don't occasionally find something sensational, if you don't occasionally find high art or cuneiform tablets that get the attention of the scholarly community, it's hard to keep the tourism coming, it's hard to keep the public interest there. And I think that it's been a very long time since anything dramatic has been discovered for Bronze Age Greece, or any of the Near Eastern, Bronze Age kingdoms. Most of the books for public consumption that you see about this place and about the Hittites and were all written in the 1960s, when the stuff was fresh. And there's not much since then, because there's actually not much new to say. And even archaeologically, a lot of the digs that are going on these common sites and on these lesser dwellings are very interesting, but they don't get published. I mean, there's a lot of archaeology being done, but it's not making it beyond the gray literature. It's not making it beyond the small reports that the individual universities put together when they're done with their dig. And it's not something you can go to Barnes & Noble or even online really and find out about. And that sort of detaches the public from the process. Okay, that's enough preaching. I'm sure this is really exciting. Alright, so I've reached the parking lot and a very nice refreshment stand. Got myself an orange Fanta. Next stop, Lion Gate. Alright, so I just got in for free. I think it might have something to do with International Museum Day being this weekend. I just remembered. I didn't think it was today, but I thought it was Saturday. I think before I go inside, I'll go have a look over here at the other Tholos tombs. Tholi? There's the plane. So there's the kind of view that they had from here. You can see the water. You can even see right there's the cliff peeking over that I climbed last night. That's the hill of Prophetus Ilias. I think, like most hills in Greece, it's got a little chapel at the top. I'm gonna head down this path. Weather's nice as usual, breezy, 80s, hardly any clouds. I think we're actually over top of a, oh yeah, we're over this one. See if there's a way down. Yep. Okay, so deja vu. You can't tell this on video, but this is not the place I just was. This is another Tholos tomb. I think this is the one they call the treasury, or the tomb of Clytemnestra, which is just a name they gave to it a few hundred years ago. It's all guesswork who was here. This one apparently, it's smaller. You can't tell that on video, but it's about half the scale of the treasury of Atreus. And let's check it out here. See if I can get inside. But this one, they believe, based on pottery, subtleties of pottery, found excavating it that this one dates slightly later than the Treasury of Atreus. It's probably the last one, the most recent one, the one that was built closest to 1200 BC when things went very bad. Oh wow. Oh. No, it doesn't seem much smaller. It's cold in here. Cold and buggy. But just as intact as the Treasury of Atreus. Actually looks a little wet over there. This is an interesting group of substantial Mycenaean buildings that are outside the walls. And the excavators, traditionally they're believed to have been merchant establishments placed, close to the citadel for their trading relationships, based on what was found inside. Lots of oil making related pottery. And then one last of the smaller Tholos tombs. They actually get a lot smaller than this in other places. But here at Mycenae, they seem to be bigger than anywhere else for the most part, with few exceptions, which is yet more evidence for the potential primacy of Mycenae. Interesting the way this is partially walled up. I don't know when that dates from or why. But this one is neat because it has collapsed. And if you go around Greece, most of these things are like this. They aren't dug in very deep, and many times modern activity going on over them in medieval times or ancient times or whenever accidentally broke into them. And it gives you an idea of what they look like. And of course this one, you can see the walls are not built with fancy big ashlar masonry. They're built with rubble, which might be part of the reason why this thing collapsed. And there it is. The so-called Lion Gate, built around 1250, about the same time as the other fancy improvements and the best of the Tholos tombs. Two lions, paws on an altar with a traditional Minoan Mycenaean column in between them, and then on top what is a representation of a Mycenaean house, a building, which you can tell because its Mycenaean buildings had exposed timber framing. If we get closer, you can see that it's sort of horizontal timbers and then timber ends in between, so it's meant to represent a house, probably the house on top of the hill, the royal house. And archaeologists don't really agree on exactly what the motif means. In fact, there are some that don't think it means anything, but that seems a little bit to me like the scholars that thought hieroglyphics were decorations. It's very likely some form of a coat of arms, and it's definitely got an Eastern influence to it. Many of the other Mycenaean palaces may have had carvings like this too, but they don't survive like this. And of course, if the Homeric tradition is accurate, then the Pelopyds, the dynasty of Atreus, the dynasty of Agamemnon, in the era of the Trojan War, were actually originally from Anatolia. So it would make sense that they might bring Eastern conventions of motifs with them, as well as lions as a symbol of royalty, which is a well-known Near Eastern motif. And I've seen a lot of books that assume that these are lionesses, but when you look at it from below, you can definitely see that there's indications of mane. There's a sort of a bulge there above the shoulders that doesn't make any sense if they're lionesses. The heads must have been pretty small, probably made out of a nicer, possibly precious material, which is why they're gone, and would have been turned looking out at us. And when you walk through the gate, there's this really neat little guard shack on the inside, just big enough for somebody to sit in, the bench. And really not even tall enough to stand up in, unless you're really short. You know, people 3,000 years ago were fairly short, but not that short. In fact, a lot of the Mycenaean nobility, because they ate a diet of meat, more so than most people, several of the bodies that I'm going to get to that were actually found right down there by Schliemann were 6-footers. This is the famous grave circle A, in which Schliemann found the bodies, and all of those gold and precious treasures that I filmed in the museum in Athens were all found right there in that circle. And the interesting thing about this is the bodies that he found in there date to about 1500 BC, 1450 at the latest. But the monumental circle you see, and this extension of Mycenae's walls that runs outside it, dates to after 1300, dates to when the Lion Gate was built. So again, whoever was ruling here was interested in monumentalizing the graves of 200, 300-year-old nobility that he might not have even been related to. But for whatever reason, he wanted to enshrine this area. He extended the citadel wall to bring it inside and turned it into a place of show, so that anybody who walked into the place through the gate would immediately see this impressive display on the right side. And then the stelas, the carved stelas, that were the first thing I filmed in the Archaeology Museum in Athens, were then put up over top of the shaft graves. One of the neat things about these sites in Greece is you're allowed to go a lot of places. I can actually walk in between the stones of the circle around the graves. There's not a lot that's roped off. Well, there's a lot that's roped off, but there's a lot that isn't roped off, and that you're surprised isn't roped off, and it's a lot more freedom to explore than used to at a historic site. And there it is. You can see how deep they are. And everybody thought Schliemann was a fool to dig here. What he was trying to find was the graves of Agamemnon, who was murdered, and his wife and children. And everybody assumed, based on a classical Greek travel writer named Pausanias, well, everybody assumed they were outside the walls. But Pausanias indicated they were inside the walls, but nobody took that seriously. Schliemann did. Came here, just started digging, and boom, found all of that stuff. Well-preserved bodies, one actual, possibly mummified body. The skin was still there when they took the mask off. The eyelids were there, the lips were there. And nobody seems to know what happened to that body. They tried to preserve it Schliemann had somebody come and soak it in alcohol, and then they cut it out of the bedrock because it couldn't be lifted, and took it to a nearby town. And but I don't think the Athens Museum has any record of the thing anymore. So Schliemann found these bodies and obviously felt vindicated and felt that he had found Agamemnon. And it's only later, as people began to understand the culture, understand the pottery and artifacts that are associated with Mycenaean graves, that it was realized that these people died, you know, at least 200 years before any feasible date of the Trojan War, very early in the history of this place. And then here, abutting the wall, all the way around the perimeter of this place, are various houses and workshops. And in fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this one I'm looking at right here is where that interesting, really unique, circa 1200 BC crater vase with the marching warriors on it was found. It was a pottery workshop. And then over here they've got protective covering over some more delicate remains. I don't think it's an active site, but now you can see a ramp. That's the walkway winding its way up the hill toward the palace at the very top. Greece, not really big on safety railings. So these are the column bases they're talking about, if you were able to read that. Whoever the heck is actually watching this other than me. Go up the steps. And you would enter the palace complex. You can see quite high up. It's a very, very steeply sloping terraced site. There's the grave circle down there. There's the back of the lion gate. It's pretty windy up here. I don't know if I'm picking this up or not. This was a courtyard, open courtyard, 2 column bases. You would pass through there, just like other Mycenaean royal halls everywhere around Greece at the same time. You would go across this threshold into an antechamber, through the next one, and into the Megaron, where it isn't looking too great. I don't know if I can get any closer than that, actually. It's disappointing. And then it's got that metal structure which is over the center, which is protecting the circular fire hearth that was in the middle. There would have been a circular fire. It's a circular hearth with a fire on it that would have been going probably continuously. And in that room, the throne was there. There would have been 4 big columns around the fire hearth. I think you can, I don't know if you can see them there or not. You can sort of see them right outside the structure. And they would have feasted in there. And of course it's a wreck now. The floors would have been tiled in very brightly colored stucco. The walls were fully stuccoed with frescoes. scene involving a city. I'm not even going to speculate about what city, because it would be irresponsible. Yeah, very windy up here suddenly. So I'll go see if I can get any closer to the Megaron, because you're allowed to run everywhere else up here. So here's the Megaron from another angle. You can see a column base right there. That corner over there is actually 20th century reconstruction, because at some point, hundreds of years ago, part of it collapsed, and if you look there, you can kind of see why. It hangs out over this deep gorge between Mycenae and the mountain. You can't really see the central hearth because it's under that contraption, but the throne would have been against that left wall. And in this room they would have feasted. And it's not that big of a room, but this is about as big as a room in Bronze Age Greece gets. It doesn't look like much now. It would have been 2 stories high. There would have been a balcony level and a central chimney to let out all the smoke from that big fire. And it would have been a very brightly painted room. Frescoes, brightly painted floors, brightly painted ceilings with geometric designs. I'd be willing to bet that there were windows, openings, because why would you build the throne room there and not give the king and his retainers some ability to look out over that view? Alright, this is the courtyard. Here are the column bases. This would have been a grand entrance into the antechamber. There's a little pedestal stand right there that may have been a guard position over the threshold into the Megaron. There are the posts. The hearth is covered up. The throne was over there. More remains of houses and basement storerooms at the edge of the citadel as I move on toward the north end. So lots of pottery sherds, of course, just like walking around Troy, lots of pottery sherds. This place was, there's one, I think, yeah. This place was not totally destroyed in 1200 BC. It was partially destroyed, and then it was finished off about 100 years later. And then it was kind of abandoned for a while, and then about, I think, 500 BC it was resettled by people. So there was classical stuff that was sort of on top of this that's been scraped off. And then it was finally destroyed, I think, around 400 BC or before by the people from Argos, because all those classical Greek city-states liked to fight each other, even though they were within sight of each other. There is at least a lot of nice interpretive signage at Mycenae, unlike Tiryns, which didn't have any interpretive signage. But then this place gets, several times the visitation that Tiryns does. Again, various house remains. Mostly what you're looking at is basement storerooms. Here we are at the narrow end of things. And somewhere down here be what I'm looking for. If it's open, I hope. I think that just goes back up. There it is. Behind me, not this. Those are big ants. Wow. And there is what I think is called a postern gate. Sort of a little secondary gate, sally port kind of a thing, easily plugged up if you don't want anybody coming in. And then this is what I wanted to see down at this end, which is another one of the improvements that they made in the 13th century BC to this place. A deep underground water cistern in case of siege. Oh, they're not Germans at all. I don't know what they are. Here we go. Oh, it's lit. Okay. I don't know if the whole thing's lit. I know they used to recommend a flashlight to come down here. The iPhone isn't that great in the dark. I wonder if I can turn on... Yikes. That is total darkness. Alright. Let me see if I can turn on the flashlight app. Those ladies have no idea what they're getting into. They may not come back. So that was interesting. So I can't use the flashlight with the camera, but it's very dark, it's very windy, it goes down very deep to the secret underground cistern, which I was expecting to have water at the bottom, but it was really just kind of damp. There were no bats that I saw, which was odd. I expected bats. The really neat thing was I actually ran into, halfway down in the dark, somebody said hello, and I said hello back, and it was a young 20-something American couple from Washington State. So my phone light was better than what they had with them. So we shared the light on the way down and back up, and they just were asking me all sorts of questions about grad school and archaeology. So that was fun. But it also kind of killed my battery power, having the flashlight on for 5 minutes. So, going to be more sparing from now on right now. I didn't bring the recharger brick with me, because I didn't think I would need it out here today. But I forgot about that underground cistern and the fact that I was going to have to use my phone light. So it's Tuesday, I'm back for a bit. Agamemnon is going to drive me around late this afternoon to scout out some things that people usually don't see and a few places I might be able to take a short walk to tomorrow. But it's close to noon. There's lots of tour buses. The place is going to be probably a lot more crowded than it was when I was here yesterday evening. I'm headed down toward the museum here, Mycenae, that I did not get a chance to go to yesterday because I was kind of busy. Let's see what they've got. These are some of the strangest things that they found here at Mycenae. In a little series of rooms that was a sort of a shrine cult center. The Mycenaeans didn't have big temples, they just had sort of small household rooms. And they're very weird and on the surface of it crude looking, but these are made at the same time as we know they were perfectly capable of making highly intricate, realistic, lifelike art as well. So chances are there's some purpose behind the fact that these are so strange. See little perforations where things were hung from them. Maybe offerings. Don't know. Alright, so the museum consists almost entirely of pottery. Lots and lots and lots of pottery that I'm sure just bores the hell out of 99% of the tourists that go through it. That's because all the good stuff is in Athens. So that didn't take too long to go through, really. I might check out the gift shop and then I'll head up to the ruins again. Well, unfortunately the gift shop is closed and looks like it has very little merchandise in it, so I think it's more or less closed for long term. But of course, while I'm sitting here, American tourist couple comes up, guy sees that the lights are off, guy sees that the sign says closed in English, still tries to open the door. Experience that every day in Gettysburg. That mountain way out there, it's as close as I can zoom, unless my eyes deceive me and that's some sort of weird sandy erosion, looks like it's got snow on it in May, which, having never been west of the Mississippi, I don't think is something I've ever seen before. So this is a more fair representation than yesterday. Conditions are like at the Lion Gate on a daily basis, at least when the buses are in.
Which is the better?
So this place is a real zoo today. I think there's about 20 buses in the parking lot at any given time. Just trying to wander away from the crowds here. Walked over to the side of the other side of the Lion Gate. It's interesting, all of the stone, it's a lot like at Troy, it's all conglomerate stone. I know the rocks at Troy had a lot of shells and things in them. I don't see any sign of aquatic life in this. So I'm back inside the grave circle for a few minutes. It's really impressive how far down these graves are. The fact that Schliemann just kept digging to that depth and found what he found. found really the second biggest unspoiled treasure in the history of archaeology after Tutankhamun. There were 19 bodies down there in 5 different chambers. So these are those basement storerooms, and interestingly, there's what looks like a huge lintel laying here that makes sort of a perfect way down. So I think I'm actually gonna go down there for a couple of minutes. A lot of the rock down here shows evidence of intense heat from the destruction of the place. Fire-cracked, ashy deposits. Well, it looks like it's actually storming over there. That's a good 12 miles away or more. So, no immediate danger, but I think it's going on 4 o'clock anyway, so I'm gonna call it a day here and go back to the hotel and let Agamemnon show me around. Just a little shot while I wait for dinner in Mycenae. There seems to be one last lingering tour bus. The site closed about a half hour ago. I think they're all eating at a taverna up that way. Once they leave, things should be pretty quiet. Looks pretty good. So I know this doesn't show up well at all, thanks to the iPhone's poor nighttime ability. But Mycenae is all lit up at night. It's about 9:30. It's kind of a partly cloudy, moonless night, so it's not the best conditions for trying to get video, but I wanted to come up here and see it. It's actually a much more bright yellow light than it's showing up in the viewfinder, where it looks kind of dull. You can barely even see the top part lit up. Maybe it'll look better when I get closer. So again, this is really much more striking in person. And it looks like the lion gate is not lit, and I recently heard the nighttime security guy relieve, I guess, the second shift security guy. I don't really want to go up there and alarm him and the dog that lives up there. So I'm just going to hang out for a little bit and walk back down. Agamemnon drove me out here, showed me some dirt roads, showed me where some interesting and very seldom seen things are. So decided to go for a little walk, check some of them out, hopefully not get lost. So since it's the first thing I've come to, I'll check out this little country church. There's a lot of these little Eastern Orthodox rural chapels around. Cemetery. So I've walked a ways now. There's several courses of random, probably classical era walls on that hillside. I don't really know what those are all about. There's the view of the plain. There's part of Mycenae. So I'm still pretty close to town. I'm never really going to be too far away. This is mostly orange groves, but here's somebody's vineyard. This is one thing that Agamemnon pointed out to me. It's an ancient well. Probably not going to get up too close to that because there could be snakes. It looks like it's full of vegetation anyway. He was telling me his frustration. He and some of the other people here have been trying to get the authorities to let them put up signage, clear paths to some of these things that are out here that aren't marked. Nobody comes here. There's nothing to direct any tourists here or other interested parties, but they haven't really gotten anywhere as far as getting permission to do that. A lot of red tape. All right, so some interesting stuff up here. Come to, that is the Dromos, the entry passage of a Tholos tomb that we're going to see in a minute. It's a much more humble Tholos tomb than the ones that we've seen, but even the less well-off people were trying to emulate the higher-ups, as always. It's over here. And there it is. You can see it's just dirt walls. And there's the entry passage. So it's a sort of a crude miniature version of the massive ones. And then only a few dozen yards away from it over here is a much nicer one. This one is known as, this one is known as the Tomb of the Demons. Not spooky demons, demons in the Greek sense, D-A-E-M-O-N, which are usually depicted in Mycenaean art as a sort of wolf-headed anthropomorphic creature that brings offerings to a goddess figure. And there was a gold ring, I think, found in there with demons on it, and so for lack of a better name, this is the Tomb of the Demons. But You really have to know where it is. And you can go inside. He led me in there earlier when we scouted it. But it's in great condition. It's again very similar to the bigger ones that are over closer to the Citadel. You can feel the cool air. As soon as you get right here, it's just a blast of cold air. The temperature goes down 20 degrees. And then inside, there are various pits that I think are, that seems to be a drainage attempt over there. Very nicely done walls, just like the treasury of Atreus. Which means this is probably one of pretty late date, pretty late 13th century BC. It's been a while since anybody's done archaeology in here. Again, look at the size of the lintel over the door. Huge. And then the relieving triangle up top to take the weight off. It's hard to say whether they brought in foreign engineering to pull this kind of stuff off. But there's the threshold right there. And it's nice and cool. I think I'll take a break in here. So I've moved on down the road. It's just endless fruit groves out here. Getting pretty breezy. It's nice though. The humidity here is always just so low. I feel so much better than I do in Virginia. I can breathe. So this is a treat. I get to see the fortifications at Mycenae from the opposite side. So I'm headed back down. Agamemnon had pointed out that covering up there on the hill is some archaeology that I think a tomb that University of Pennsylvania was working on a few years ago. They've covered it up till they can maybe get back to it after they're done doing other things. There was another Tholos tomb that he showed me that was nice. There's a whole pile of oranges down there. There was another Tholos tomb that he showed me. It was a nicely built one, but it wasn't intact. But I guess they all start to look alike after a while. It's fun to see, but you don't need to film all of them. And anyway, I don't exactly remember where that was now. So that's probably about it. Let's hike on back to town and get him to make me something to eat. I walked into thinking it's the back way. Don't want to be too obnoxious, but wanted to film this nice little church. Main Street, back to La Belle Lena. So I'm walking up to the site one last time in the morning to say my goodbyes before I head to the bus, and just caught a glimpse of one of the things I hoped to try to find before I left, which is a Mycenaean dam, or bridge, probably a roadway over the top of it, you know, acting also as a dam. There it is. Well, I did it. I beat the buses. So I was able to have a few minutes of it to myself this morning. So I'm gonna hike back down. I'm gonna see if I can get to that bridge slash dam that I spotted. I think I can. And then I gotta head on over to Fichte, which is that town over there, to catch the K-Tel bus back to Athens. Alright, so off to find that bridge. This should connect with that little road there, which should connect me to that chapel. And if I can go past the chapel, I should be able to get to that big stone dam. And I've reached the chapel. The road turns into more of a path. See if there's any way to get down to it. It should be right up here on the right. Okay, well, there it is. Or at least the part of it on this side that survives. The part over there, there's no trace of. But unfortunately, it's pretty overgrown and there's no path to get down in there. So that's as close as I'm gonna get. And probably there are a series of small triangular holes through it down at the bottom that could be plugged to control the water flow. Although there's not a lot of sign of water flow now, or that there has been at any time in the recent past. I don't even think this winter there was any water down here by the looks of it. Once upon a time, things were wetter here. Actually, it would have been very different. These the hills were probably, these hills were forested. Greece was a lot less scrubby. But a lot of the ancient world was like that. Anatolia was covered in forests and now it's barren. Lebanon, covered in cedar forests. Great big trees. But this is what happens to an environment when you cut down all the forests. But we know from Mycenaean artifacts, all the hunting scenes, that they're hunting big game, which just isn't around here anymore because there's no place for it. Yep, I don't think there's a path. I don't think anybody's been down to that thing in a long, long time. All right, good enough. Just a little bit better view of it. And there's Mycenae way in the background behind the telephone pole. So this whole valley, especially the left slope, from here all the way up to the citadel, would have been scattered houses. Closer up to the citadel it would have been solid city, but out here scattered tombs and houses, but all settled, and now it's all just trees and that cemetery up there. Okay, so I'm back in Athens, back at the Euripides Hotel. No problems. I have a different room with the world's tiniest balcony. Not really room for a chair. So this is Heinrich Schliemann's house in Athens, which is now the Numismatic Museum. Well, I thought I'd come up on the roof, because I had not seen the Parthenon all lit up. Leaving in the morning. There's a guy watching TV in his car. Again, I don't think the iPhone video camera does a very good job of picking up lights at night. That's an amusement park. It's definitely a Ferris wheel. It's been a good trip. Did everything I wanted to do here. So I am ready to go home. Bye-bye Athens. Bye-bye Greece. Bye-bye guy watching TV. Oh, he's not at the table anymore.